Kuroume is a Japanese illustrator who draws expressive, colorful illustrations that have a unique aesthetic and atmosphere to them. Kuroumes' art has been a big inspiration to me for a long time. I first saw it in this YouTube video and wanted to figure out who the artist behind these visuals is, and that's how I discovered Kuroumes' art. In today's video I'll share my study of Kuroume. I'll start by focusing on different elements in the art, then I'll combine all of these for creating my own illustration. Let's start with the first element. Before we begin, a small note: I will blend in a text that summarizes what I'm talking about at the bottom of the video. You should be able to screenshot any part of this analysis, and like this have a note for a specific aspect you would like to be inspired by from this artist, defined by the text down there with a visual through the video itself. Kuroume's art features varying line thickness, with the face and eye outlines being the thickest. Outer lines are thicker than inner lines, with the clearest lines often found around the face. The lines are clear but can be sketchy, transitioning into a painterly style for more illustrative works. Many lines are used to portray folds and hair strands. In some artworks, the line art transitions into color, especially in the clothes. The lines are typically dark brown, but colored lines can also be used, especially for inner lines such as for the hair strands or clothes. Some illustrations also have fewer lines, emphasizing the painterly style. The characters in Kuroume's style are typically 6 to 7 heads tall. Rather sharp lines and not too rounded ones tend to be used to portray the characters' bodies, giving them a more stylized look. They have very thin bodies with defined knuckles and collarbones, giving them a bony appearance with few muscles. The necks, arms and torsos are very thin, though the torso is often not as extreme. This thinness makes the characters look elegant and dynamic. The proportions fit the more sickly, twisted look of the characters with clear shapes and highly stylized proportions. The characters have big heads and smaller bodies, making them look young, while the thin stylized proportions also give them an older appearance. Hands and fingers tend to be especially thin, exaggerated, a bit deformed, and overall expressive, with knuckles showing and rather sharp changes in direction, for example. The face shape features a pointy chin and rounded contours. I like to look at the change of direction from the chin outwards to the cheek, upwards to the eyes as a visual guide when drawing and analyzing faces. Here this change of direction often appears a bit rounded. It's not always too defined, but it tends to be around the mouth or nose level vertically and around the outer eye corner horizontally. The lower face shape is pretty full. The face proportions have around equal distances, but the distance from the eyes to the nose is sometimes a bit longer. The lower part of the face is slightly thinner than the upper part. The nose has two changes of direction, with the lower one consistent while the upper one can vary in length. For characters viewed more from the side, this line tends to get longer. The nose line may have a triangular shape, while the upper line can also have a more rounded shape. Sometimes the lower line of the nose also has a smaller line underneath. The nose often includes a nostril and may have a shadow or light, typically in a triangular shape. The light and shadow can define the planes of the nose. The mouth is portrayed with a line of varying thickness, thickest at the corners and thinner in the inner part. Characters often have expressive faces, with mouths open to show teeth or tongue, which appear sharp and zigzaggy. For closed mouths, a small zigzag in the outline conveys a tooth. A slight shadow along the lip or below it can indicate the chin. Even though the mouths are expressive, they tend to be small, making the characters appear more cute and stylized. The eyebrows in Kuroume's art are small and thin, with a sharp, clear shape and slightly rounded. They are used to convey various expressions, and they can have varying length. The inner part tends to be slightly thicker than the outer part. Eyes are placed slightly lower than the middle of the head. The eyes usually have a longer almond shape, with characters often looking like they are slightly squinting. The upper lash has a rounded shape, while the lower one is slightly more edgy. The upper eyelash is fully filled and thick, and the lower one, of similar thickness, is outlined and filled with a slightly more reddish skin color. The inner eye corner is not outlined. The lashes include one very long one at the outer upper eye corner, as well as multiple smaller triangular ones around the eye. Often there would be 3 to 4 additional lashes at the upper as well as at the lower eye outline. At times, small gaps are also included in the eye outline. There are 2 lines above the eye, with the closer one following the eye shape and the higher one more straight. The inner corner of the lower eye line sometimes has a small shadow or line, forming a triangle shape. A line below the eye transitions into red, making the eyes transition more seamlessly into the face. The iris is circular and rather big. The levels of brightness typically include an outer color, inner color, and pupil, which varies depending on the character. Highlights are often absent, making the characters look less cute and more sickly. The lashes tend to be shaded in Kuroume illustrations. Usually 3 shades can be used here, of which one will be colorful, fitting to the colors in the character illustration. Another reddish shade would then be used for the lower eyelash. Around the eyes, the darkest shadow is at the lower line, and there can be a slight shadow at the inner upper eye corner. Sometimes more shadows around the upper eyeline or a shadow below the eyebrow is added. Blush around the cheeks often includes many lines, adding to the expressiveness of Kuroume's illustrations. The white of the eye has no shadow or sometimes a slight red line under the upper eyelash. The hairline art focuses on silhouettes and shapes with messy strands that sometimes transition into color. The thickness of strands varies, with thinner flyaway hairs around the forehead, creating flowy and messy shapes. The hair shape is defined with many added lines for strands. Hair shading involves a lot of shapes following the lighting direction and shape of the head, usually zigzaggy. For a basic shading, a base color and shadow are used. For more detailed shading, layers include the base, a shadow layer, a darker shadow layer, a light layer, as well as a layer for highlights. A saturated border can be included at times. Hair over the facial features either fully covers the eyes and eyebrows or makes them partly visible underneath with lower transparency. Clothes have thicker lines for silhouettes and thinner lines for folds, with folds mostly portrayed through shading. Often lines are painted over, with fewer lines that are sometimes colored. Fold lines are often incomplete, with triangular or rounded shapes. The outfits are detailed, mixing formal with modern and playful elements including dresses, belts, bows and frills. Stripes or other patterns are common, and the overall aesthetic includes kawaii or goth and scene elements. The clothes match the themes of the illustrations, such as angel wings for an angel-themed artwork. The color palettes vary depending on the illustration, often featuring one strong neon color, most commonly pink, used as the main color. This color often appears in the background and overall lighting. An analogous color scheme is often used, with one main color, though complementary colors like green and red or blue and orange are also used. Heavy contrast through black and white areas frame the characters and add drama. Some illustrations feature less contrast, with mostly pastel colors. The outfits often include black or white parts here. Lighting scenarios in Kuroume's art add a lot to the illustrations. This can include direct frontal light functioning as a spotlight or backlighting, casting most of the character in shadow. The shading and lighting usually match the overall colors in the illustration, with common hues being pink, purple or blue. Typically, one hue is used for both lighting and shading, though warm light and cool shadows can also be used, adding more hues. Shading is mostly cel shading, but more painterly illustrations might have blended edges, harsh edges, and heavy contrast and shading emphasize detail. The shadow shapes are commonly rounded and rough, giving a textured, hand-drawn look. Shading involves several layers, a base layer, a second base layer for more color variation, a first shadow layer as well as a second one, then a light layer and finally a hue variation layer. These layers can be adapted for different illustrations. Some illustrations feature fewer shadow levels, using a base color and 1 or 2 shadow layers with all color variations. Hue variation is portrayed with shapes that have harsh edges, and the brightness of the colors varies little. Often the hue variation separates parts and adds detail more than value variation here. Textured brushes might also be used for shadow edges or to draw shading. Backgrounds often feature a flat color that fits the character's colors and overall lighting, usually neon and eye-catching. This helps separate the character from the background, framing them and putting more focus on them. More complex backgrounds might include patterns, grids, text, and in a few cases, more detailed props, rooms, and scenes. Additional effects include accessories and props fitting a creepy and cute goth and kawaii aesthetic, such as teddy bears, hearts, angel wings, piercings, or bandages. Small logos or symbols like hearts or bows can be added around the character as well. Now that we've gone through all the elements in the analysis part, let's apply them in an illustration next. Here I drew my OC Yumari, the moon guardian of his world, who I have also drawn for multiple previous art style videos before. We start with the sketch. While I first wanted to draw my usual guidelines, I also saw Kuroume using a blocked in silhouette in one of their process videos, and I wanted to try using this approach as well. Because of this, I then opted for this instead and blocked in the pose this way. I wanted the head and shoulder angle to be different from each other to achieve a bit of a twisted pose, which fits to Kuroume's art to me. Then I also wanted to include a hand in front. After my initial first block-in, I drew some guidelines on top and to make sure the body's pose would work, I then took the pose and scaled it down to add the rest of the body. I adjusted the guidelines this way and then started with sketching in the head. I first drew a closed mouth, but changed this since it looked kind of awkward to me. Still, I wanted to include this kind of tooth shape in the mouth outline for both versions, and did so here. I also included a moon shape for the pupil, as Yumari is the moon guardian in his world. And Kuroume often draws in shapes like hearts for the pupil. I thought including this here may work nicely. After this, I then sketched in the hair. I wanted to make sure it would be flowy by making the frontal hair strands be in motion. At first I drew both these frontal strands with around the same length, even though in Yumari's design the one on his right side is shorter. I guess I was very caught up in drawing the hair and making sure it would be flowy, which is why I only noticed this and fixed it afterwards. After the hair, I sketched in the body, making sure to use more stylized proportions. By making the body, especially the neck and arms, smaller and thinner, I added a hand as well, and it was fun to use a bit more sharp blocky shapes for the body and hands here. I also tried adding a second hand, but disregarded the idea. After the body, I moved on to sketching in the outfit. Here I like to go off Yumari's initial outfit design and add in different accessoires fitting to the artist I'm studying. I like adding these parts, and here I went with this headband and some frills and bows as well as some hair clips. I find the head accessoires bring focus to the head, which is nice. I also added some additional straps, a necklace and a cut-in part in the sleeve on the right side of the illustration. Then I added some flowy parts, which I would imagine coming from the back of Yumari's outfit, and different elements for the background. After adjusting the hair and eyes the sketch, I moved on to the line art next. I started with the head and paid a lot of attention to adding different line thickness, especially drawing in the hair strands and making sure they would be flowy was a lot of fun to me. For the outfit, I had to gather some references for the frills and bows. There are different types of both, which I find interesting. Drawing in the details, like the inner lines on the straps or the small accessoires, takes some time, but it leads to nicer looking outfits, so I enjoyed this here. For the small hearts on the straps, I also used layer effect to add an outline to the heart shape I would draw. Next, I continued by drawing in various outfit parts, paying attention to making outlines thicker and inner lines thinner. I finished up the line art by adding all final accessoires, background elements and more line thickness to the eyes. For example, I erased overlapping lines and filled in flat colors after this. Here I didn't go for the colors I would use in the end. I changed the colors after determining the shading colors for the different parts using the shading systems I determined during my analysis. Then I started shading. First I blocked in the lighting. I wanted to go for a backlight, meaning the silhouette of the character would be brighter than the inner parts, leading to a bit of an unsettling atmosphere, which I saw in some illustrations of Kuroume. I also find it interesting and wanted to include this here. Next I went through the color group layers, starting with the skin and using the shading layers I determined in my analysis. After the skin I moved on to the eyes. After these I shaded the lashes, which is something I don't do usually. After the eyes it was time for the hair. While Kuroume mostly uses cell shading, which you can easily portray by using a lasso selections, I mostly painted the shadows in here, leading to a bit more soft edges that are still rather sharp. I went back to the skin layer group to add some lights here since I noticed I hadn't added them before. Then I also added highlights to the hair. After this, I then moved on to shading the outfit, adding around 6 colors by using the 5 layers, base 2, shadow, shadow 2, light and hue variation on top of the base layer. Shading the silver metal parts here is a bit different, as the material for this is different. I would also imagine the bright purple parts of Yumari's shirt here have a more soft fabric than the dark purple parts. The white frills have a different material as well, and paying attention to this, shading the outfit parts accordingly helps to separate the different outfit parts. Adding saturated or darker shading borders here is also something I incorporated for the shading of the outfit parts. Towards the end of the shading process, I also added some blush lines. As you can see, I focused on just shading the character. Then I wanted to apply the blocked in shading, using a multiply layer on top of everything. I find separating the shading like this for one shading the parts generally, and then applying the lighting specific to the image can make including more specific shading or lighting setups like here easier. After this, I tried out various colors for the background. I also applied some curves filter masks to adjust the contrast. I also colored the background elements and the character line art. To color the character line art, I copied my color layer, merged it, clipped it on top of a selection of the colors and lines that was filled in with a flat color. And after this, I copied the color layer a bunch of times and blurred copies of it. Then I merged this to add it on top of the line art layer and clip it to it. I copy the clipped layer and turn it into the multiply layer mode. After that I copy this line art layer and use modes like normal, overlay or multiply, and I blur some versions of the line art for a softer look. Finally, I created a few variations of the coloring. For version 1 we'd have a intense multiply shadow layer with a blue neon background. Version 2 would include a white background with an overall multiply layer that is not too intense. Version 3 would then have the same background with the least intense shading. Let me know which version you like most in the comments. After having drawn the illustration in Kuroume's art style, let's move on to the differences I see between my artwork and Kuroume's illustrations. If you see any other differences, you can also tell me in the comments. The first difference I would like to mention would be that in my illustration there are not as many textures. Especially for the outfit parts, I think Kuroume may include more various ones. The next aspect I would mention would be the shading of the moons. While I'm not sure how Kuroume would shade this, I'm not too happy with how this turned out in my illustration and would think Kuroume would draw this differently as well. Another aspect that would be a difference to me would be the background. I tried to come up with one myself which I could see Kuroume use. But again, I'm not too sure, maybe this is too symmetrical. The next difference I would point out would be that the shadow edges turned out too blended in my illustration at times. As last difference, I would mention the asymmetry of the eyebrows. While this was intentional, I'm not sure if that's how Kuroume would also draw it. After the differences, I would like to move on to my learnings next. Kuroume uses heavy contrast often, but at times also just varying hues and saturation levels instead of only brightness levels to separate parts. My learning here would be to not just use brightness contrast but also color contrasts, which may not appear as extreme but can still be very useful. An example for applying this learning would be when you want to include more detailed, complex elements and outfits while still making the character's face appear as the focal point. This can work by separating the parts in the outfit and background through hue and saturation, mostly while the face gets separated through values as well. I tend to go for rather brightly lit illustrations with not as interesting lighting. Through drawing Yomari here, I discovered how you can easily create variations with more extreme lighting using separate multiply, overlay or burn layers on top of everything. For example, interesting expressions are eye-catching. If it suits the illustrations you are drawing, make sure to push the expressions you use. And finally, adding various themed elements, accessoires, outfit and props fitting to the character can add a lot to each illustration. Paying attention to this when planning what colors, theme and atmosphere or mood you would like to convey through the illustration can help to implement this. And that's it for this art style study of Kuroume. I'll leave links to Kuroume's art in the video description. Feel free to check it out. You'll also be able to find full screen recorded process videos of drawing the basic body and the basic head I included in this video on my Patreon, along with a lot of other screen recorded process videos, time lapses and full resolution images of my art. I hope the video was insightful to you. It would mean a lot if you gave it a like and left a comment with your feedback. What would also mean a lot would be subscribing in case you are interested in seeing more videos like these. Thanks for watching, have a nice day and bye!